Please pray with me. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable to you, O Lord. You are our rock. You are our Redeemer. Amen. Several weeks ago, Debbie Friedman, my mother's oldest and dearest friend, died after many years of courageously battling cancer. Over the last 5 decades, my family and Debbie's have been intimately entwined through some joyful and some very challenging times. Debbie had known me my entire life, and as I age, I realize that the people who fall into that category are becoming a diminishing group. Now, needless to say, I am no stranger to funerals, but this funeral was different from most that I attend. Debbie was Jewish, and while I have been to Jewish funerals, Debbie's burial incorporated a number of rituals that I had not seen before. I found them incredibly moving, and I want to share some of them with you. After a beautiful service at the synagogue, we drove to the Jewish cemetery and met the hearse at the top of a steep hill. The family plot was down a treacherous path, and the rabbi led the procession to the grave. Debbie's sons, my lifelong friends, carried their mother's casket and were followed by the rest of us. It was hot, and the ground was uneven, so we made our way very slowly. As we went, the rabbi had us stop 7 times. In Judaism, the number 7 is sacred, and she said brief prayers and psalms at each stop. This ritual, called the layaya, is derived from the Hebrew word for accompaniment, and the stops symbolize the visceral lament of mourners as they accompany their loved one to the grave. Once Debbie's casket had been lowered and more prayers had been offered, we were invited to shovel dirt into the grave. Now, most of you know that when we do burials, we often sprinkle a little dirt or some of the ashes. Jewish tradition dictates that the casket is covered entirely with dirt before the mourners depart. This ritual is called Hesed Shel Emet, which means true kindness, and is understood to be a final act of care and compassion for the deceased. Tradition also requires that the caskets be simple, unadorned wooden boxes that will naturally decompose. So therefore, in this case, you could really hear the rocky soil pounding the thin wood, and the jolting sound over and over felt like a tangible expression of the pain we were feeling. Even Debbie's beloved young grandchildren helped, struggling to lift the heavy shovel. Finally, the rabbi asked us to form a shura. This is a human tunnel of sorts. It's made of 2 parallel lines, and the primary mourners walk through it as they depart from the grave. Debbie's children and siblings pass by, her sons holding up their elderly uncles, and we were invited to reach out and touch them as a physical and spiritual expression of their community holding them in their grief. Later that evening, the family sat Shiva in Debbie's home. We shared stories and memories, and I was reminded of that great line in Steel Magnolias when Dolly Parton in the role of Truvy says, "Laughter through tears is my favorite emotion." What struck me about these rituals was the space and reverence for lament and the role of the community within it. These physical acts around the burial invited us to embody our grief in a visceral and tangible way. While our Jewish siblings would not use this word, they were sacramental in a sense, outward and visible signs of an inward experience, in this case, one of grief. All of this brings me to this morning's psalm. Psalm 86 is a prayer of lament. The psalmist begins with a petition for guidance and an expression of praise for God's love and protection. Teach me your way, O Lord, that I may walk in your truth. Give me an undivided heart. I give thanks to you, O Lord my God, with my whole heart, for great is your steadfast love for me. But then his tone changes, and it becomes clear that he is in some sort of predicament. O God, the insolent rise up against me. A band of ruffians seeks my life, and they do not set you before them, he says. This is all the detail that we're given, but it seems clear that he is in some sort of danger. He implores God in the midst of his struggle. You, O Lord, are a God merciful and gracious, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness. Turn to me and be gracious to me. Give your strength to your servant. Now, perhaps most of us do not find ourselves living in mortal danger, but we can identify with enduring difficult times. Grief, loss, fear, confusion, despair, anger, hopelessness, all of these are part of our human experience. And yet, I do not think that we are very good at offering prayers of lament when we find ourselves struggling. There are a number of reasons for this. Sometimes I think we fear that our prayers expressing negative emotions are somehow unacceptable to God because they feel frivolous or inconsequential or ungrateful. We also live in a culture that values independence, and that can discourage us from acknowledging our own struggle and vulnerability. And we get a lot of messages about the importance of being positive and looking on the bright side. In my pastoral ministry, I noticed that because most of us live very privileged lives, we feel guilty if we express that something is challenging because at least we have warm homes and food to eat, right? This is connected to a further phenomenon I observe, which is our tendency to downplay whatever difficult thing we are experiencing, because it could always be worse. You know this one. Let me give you some examples. Unfortunately, I fell and broke every bone in my body, but at least my eyes still work. Or, I miss my spouse so much that I don't know how to get out of bed in the morning, but at least we had 50 years together. Or, I really don't know how to parent my child right now, but at least he doesn't have cancer. We don't allow ourselves to simply say, I sure wish I hadn't fallen, or my grief is debilitating, or parenting is really hard. So this morning, St. Paul's, I am calling on us to reclaim lament. Our psalmist today offers us an inspiring model of faithfulness. He takes his full experience to God, his gratitude and his praise for sure, but also his fear, his vulnerability, and his anger. In the words of the old hymn, he takes it to the Lord in prayer. He trusts that God does not judge the validity of our prayers, but instead values their honesty. He trusts that God can handle our lament. What God desires from us is relationship, and God welcomes us in whatever way we come, even and especially in our darkest moments. Not just receiving our strife, but lovingly holding us in it. In this way, our human faithfulness through our lament becomes a reflection of divine faithfulness towards us. Lament also reminds us of our vulnerability and dependence on God. It is an authentic acknowledgement that we are not in control. As one of my former professors, Herbert Anderson, said, "The presence of lament keeps ritual honest and allows grief to be real. When our prayers do not include protest, it is too easy to overlook deeper pain and hidden ambiguities of private grief and public tragedy. When individuals lament, they keep faith with God who suffers with us. When the community laments, it demonstrates with its tears that suffering is not without meaning and that suffering is worth weeping over." Finally, as ironic as it sounds, lament is an expression of hope. We are not powerless in the midst of our suffering. We can offer the hard prayers on our hearts with the faith that the God who overcame death and rose to new life might also redeem our pain. And so, my friends, consider what it might look like for you to reclaim lament, offering your most honest prayers and looking to God for strength in whatever trials you are facing. In my own life, I'm trying to sit with the grief of losing Debbie, grief on behalf of her children and grandchildren, grief on behalf of my mom and my family, and of our world that lost a bright light. In the words of today's psalm, I am reminded that God is merciful and gracious, abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness. And God welcomes my grief and whatever it is that the rest of you bring. Amen.